Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for joining us for today's webinar presentation hosted by the LA County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Today we're going to be discussing the California foreclosure process and specifically requesting assistance, including loan modifications. So again, we thank you for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions throughout the program for our presenters, we would ask that you type it in the chat box. And at the end of the presentation, we will leave some time for questions and answers for as many as possible as time allows. And you can do that at any time. So let's get started. We're going to hand it over to one of our presenters, Samuel Lukin. So Sam, take it away.
Kevin, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam. Welcome to another webinar brought to you by the County of Los Angeles Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Our mission statement as the department-wide goes essentially to promote a fair and vibrant marketplace. We serve consumers and businesses and communities through education, advocacy, and complaint resolution. The department has been serving the County of Los Angeles consumers and businesses since 1976. Next slide. Now, just a small recap. My name is Samuel Lukin. I am a foreclosure prevention counselor with the department within the department's unit called the Foreclosure Prevention Program. Accompanying me today is Angelina Bonilla, who is also a foreclosure prevention counselor. Our direct contact emails are there. If you were looking to contact the department, you could email us directly concerning anything about foreclosure at homehelp@dcba.lacounty.gov. Our website is listed right underneath there at dcba.lacounty.gov, and our telephone number is listed right below that, 833-238-4450. Next slide. Now, what we really want to start this presentation about is talking about the idea of what is foreclosure. Now, we've done sort of, we have included this information in webinars in the past, but with the increase in foreclosures as certain programs are ending and moratoriums are ending, it is important to really drill this down. Foreclosure is actually the legal process that's used by a lender in order to recover the balance of a loan when a property owner fails to meet the obligations of a loan. Now, a common misconception is that foreclosure is only going to be triggered by lack of payments. There are other ways to trigger a foreclosure. For example, a homeowners association can trigger a foreclosure if they're not paid their dues. A reverse mortgage can trigger a foreclosure if the property is in disrepair. There's a long list of things, but we might get into that in a little bit. Next slide. Now, in California, there are two different types of foreclosure, the first being judicial, the second being non-judicial. Now, a judicial foreclosure is typically going to involve a mortgage, and a mortgage involves two parties, one being the borrower, the other being the lender. Now, in order for the lender to foreclose, they're going to have to sue in court and get a court order for permission to foreclose against the property. Now, more commonly, a non-judicial foreclosure is going to take place in California. Now, a non-judicial foreclosure is going to begin with a deed of trust, and that's a loan taken out against a property. And it is going to involve a borrower and a lender like a mortgage would, but it's also going to involve a third party called the trustee. Now, what the borrower will do is convey the power to sell, should they fail to meet any of the obligations of the loan, over to the trustee. Now, when the borrower defaults, the lender is required to send a request over to the trustee in order to initiate the foreclosure proceedings. Now, a foreclosure trustee will in fact conduct a public auction, and they don't need a court order, or they don't need to go through court proceedings to get this done. The auction will set a minimum bid for what is owed against the loan to clear it and sell it to the highest bidder. Now, again, in California, both can be used, but generally it's a non-judicial state just because of how much more simple it is. Next slide. Now, the foreclosure process really sort of breaks up into these little sections here. The first, when a borrower fails to meet their obligation, a notice of default will be recorded with the county recorder's office. That document's going to, as you'll see in a little bit, it's going to be the first one that's recorded. It's going to have a lot of different information on it that is important. But again, it's step one. Now, 90 days must go by before the notice of trustee sale can be recorded. Now, that's another document that does have to be recorded with the county recorder's office. But this document will show that there's going to be a sale date set no sooner than 21 days after it's recorded. if the property does in fact get to that date, an auction is going to take place, and one of four outcomes will be on the table. The first one would be the auction is postponed for whatever reason. The borrower or the lender come to an agreement, or maybe there's something stalls it and they postpone it and they say, okay, we'll push it back maybe 30 days to review a potential workout outcome. But that'll just essentially send the sale back to the auction in the future. The second option would be the property is sold to the bank. So if the auction takes place and nobody's willing to bid on it, the lender is going to become the new owner of the property. They're going to pay off the debt, and that's what the industry calls an REO, or real estate owned property. The third option would be the property is sold to a third party. So that party would essentially pay off whatever's owed. They would gain title of the property and then move forward as expected. The last one would be the auction is canceled. Normally this happens, the auction is canceled because the lender and the property owner have come to usually a permanent foreclosure alternative. Maybe they worked out a refinance, a loan modification, a repayment plan, something that would put them back into normal servicing. Now, the middle two options, the property being sold to the bank or sold to a third party, is going to trigger the recording of a trustee's deed upon sale. Now, this document transfers the property to the purchaser, and it's going to show how much they purchased the property for, when it was purchased, and essentially what their identity, who they are. Okay, next slide. Now, going back to notice of default, it's important to understand that the lender is going to record that notice of default, or most typically used the acronym ND, after a borrower fails to meet the terms of their loan. This is the beginning or the start of the foreclosure process. Once you get a notice of default, the property has not foreclosed, but it is in foreclosure. At this time, it's highly recommended that any property owner, should they receive something like this, verify that it's legitimate and begin applying for foreclosure prevention options. Next slide. Now, this is a sample of a typical notice of default that you will receive, from either from your lender, or if you live in the county, you'll receive it from the county recorder's office, or technically from our office. It's going to show the address of the property, it's going to show the borrowers, and it's going to show how far at that point in time when the document was recorded that borrower is behind. Next slide. Now, as mentioned before, the notice of trustee sale or the notice of sale, typically the acronym used is NT. It's going to be recorded 3 months or 90 days after the notice of default is recorded. Like I mentioned before, this document is a little more important because it does give a pretty hard and fast sale date if nothing is done. It'll show the auction date, it'll show the time, the place, and how much is owed, actually different from the notice of default, where the notice of default will show what is owed at that time. The notice of trustee sale is going to show what is owed to clear the entire loan out. Okay. It is still strongly encouraged for individuals or property owners to apply for foreclosure prevention services, but it can be limited just because of the way the laws work and things like that. But we'll get into that in a bit. Next slide. Now, this is a actual like the notice of default. This is a common sort of cookie cutter notice of trustee sale document that's used. You will see again the title at the top, notice of trustee sale. You'll get the property address, what's owed to clear the loan. You're going to see the borrower's name, and there's also going to be included an extra little bit of information called a trustee's sale line. Now, normally it's going to come with a telephone number and a case number where an individual, anybody could really call because it's public information. Anybody could call and ask for the most up-to-date information on the date and time of the sale. So if it does get postponed, that information is supposed to be known. If it has gone through or if it's been canceled, things like that, anybody could call, and as long as you have access to that document. Next slide. Now, again, going back, if the property does go and sell at auction, the trustee's deed upon sale is going to be recorded. It's going to transfer the property over to the winning bidder, whether it's the bank or a third party. Just as mentioned in the second slide here, by default, it will be the lender if either nobody shows up to the auction or nobody's willing to pay what's being asked for. At this point, counseling moving forward is going to be, especially for any occupant or owner of the property, to kind of look at what's in front of them. Next slide. Again, this is a common notice of trustees deed upon sale document that's recorded. It'll show how much the property was sold for. It'll show who purchased the property, which is very important because you want to make sure if somebody's approaching the actual property that they own it, and this document will actually prove that. It's also important if a previous owner does get this document and they see that the property maybe went into a bidding war and it sold for more than they owed, then it would be time to contact the trustee to talk about excess proceeds from that sale. Next slide. Now, after the foreclosure, a notice to vacate is typically going to be served to the occupants of the property. Now, if the person or persons occupying the property were the owners of it when it did foreclose, they're only entitled to receive a 3-day notice to vacate. Now, if the owner of the property wasn't, or if the occupant of the property was what's called a bona fide tenant, the tenants may actually be able to receive a longer notice before eviction, normally 90 days, depending on the length of time that they've lived there, and a couple of different factors. But in both scenarios, a cash for keys negotiation is actually strongly encouraged. Cash for keys is not something that's written into the law that says it has to take place. It's more of an idea that the two parties are going to come together and they're both going to have a mutual understanding that the occupant needs to leave and the new owner doesn't want to have to drag out an eviction process, and they want to get the property in good standing. So sometimes they may come to an agreement where they say, hey, I need 30 days and I'll just leave. Just don't evict, don't put anything on my credit or my record. They come to that agreement. That's what they come to. Okay, that is something that our department does help with, at least help opening the lines of communication, between the two parties. Next slide. Now, the second part here that we really want to sort of drive home is when it comes to understanding how foreclosure works. A lot of people are gonna say, "Well, how am I gonna know if my property's in foreclosure? What if I don't get my mail, or what if my lender's not in communication with me, or what if I'm just out of town?" Well, the homeowner notification program was established in 1996 to alert homeowners of newly recorded documents. Now, originally, this only include changes in title, whether it be addition or subtraction, and deeds of trust, which would be a loan being taken out of the property. Now, copies of the documents were required to be mailed to the property address and any mailing address that the property has on file with the county. It was essentially meant to notify individuals or property owners that these changes were being made to their property. Next slide. Now, when it comes to foreclosure, SB 62 established that in addition to the changes in title, that any document related to foreclosure, meaning the notice of default or the notice of trustee sale, also had to be mailed to property owners and at the address and the mailing address to make them aware that free foreclosure help is available, which would be with our office, and to sort of alert them of scams or anything else that might be going on from somebody who's maybe unscrupulous or maybe doesn't have their best interest in mind. A couple of years later, SB 827 actually reduced the time that the department or the county was required to mail these notices out. Originally, it was 20 days, now it's 14 days. The goal really is, like I said before, just to make sure that the right information gets out to these property owners that are in distress. Closure is a very stressful time, and you might be willing to hear anything from anyone if they promise that they can get you out of trouble. Now, AB 1106 actually extended the program for another 10 years. So I believe we're clear through 2030 or maybe 2029, but it's still going on and the assistance is still available. Next slide. Now, why are we mentioning all of this? The foreclosure prevention services that are provided by the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs is run by a dedicated group of about 10 or 11 people. And our main goal really here is to assist homeowners in preventing or avoiding the foreclosure of their property. Now, every person's situation is in fact different. The benefit of working with our department is that you're going to get individual attention from a counselor who has seen this, all kinds of situations for a lot of years. Our goal is really to open up a dialogue with the lender and explore any and all foreclosure alternative options that the property owner may be entitled to. Next slide. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass this portion of the presentation off to my colleague, Angelina Bonilla. She's going to go over the request for mortgage assistance, which is typically called an RMA, and how a property owner would go about getting that completed. Angelina?
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be talking about the request for mortgage assistance. So when a consumer contacts us because they have defaulted on their loan, we reach out to the servicer with a request for mortgage assistance to see if they qualify for a loan modification or to see what other options are available to them. So we always tell the borrower that this is a request, not a demand. The assistance that ends up being offered depends on everybody's individual circumstances. So this includes their income, who owns or backs their mortgage, the programs that are being offered, and the eligibility criteria that's been set. Also, what limits were initially set when the loan was taken out. So if there's a loan modification, how low an interest rate can be changed to, or in a deferral, how much money can be placed into a balloon payment. Next slide, please. So we provide the borrower with an RMA packet to be completed and submitted to the servicer for review. Within this packet is the Form 710, the Uniform Borrowers Agreement, which is the mortgage assistance application, and you can see the first page of that right there. The Form 4506T for the release of tax information. The borrower is required to detail their hardship, so we provide a sample letter for them. Also a contribution letter, and this will be completed by any individuals who are contributing to the household income. And we also provide a sample profit and loss statement, and this would be completed by individuals who are self-employed. Next slide. So in addition to the documents in the RMA packet, we also provide a list that outlines the documents that will most likely be required by the servicer. This includes a mortgage statement, most recent tax returns and W-2 forms, the bank statements, pay stubs, the rental income, and proof of any other income that the borrower might be receiving. Next slide, please. So it's very important to complete and submit this packet in a timely manner. When you think about the foreclosure timeline that Sam just talked about, from the date that the notice of default was recorded, we have 90 days and then 21 days before the trustee sale date. Also, it normally takes about 30 days for the application to be reviewed. So that's the window of time that we're working with. It's also important to know that documents might need to be resubmitted. So for example, they require the last 2 months of bank statements and the last 2 pay stubs. So if there's some documents that are missing or they were rejected and you already submitted your income, a month might go by and then that income that you submitted initially is already outdated. So then you have to resubmit it. So it's important to know the window of time that you're working with and also the process. And there might be a lot of little steps involved. And we always advise to get started early and get all this submitted as soon as possible. Okay, next slide, please. So the single point of contact is an individual or a small group of individuals assigned to the borrower by the bank. And this is the person that we'll be contacting on a continuing basis with our questions, our concerns. We'll be following up with them, making sure that all the documents have been submitted, that everything's in order. This is important. This person's important, the single point of contact person or group of people, because it avoids getting conflicting information. If we call a bunch of different people at the bank, somebody might not know exactly what's going on with this account and they might tell us something slightly different. So it's important to have this single point of contact. You can compare the role of the SPOC to the counselor that's provided to you at DCBA when you call us and we open a case for you. You'll be calling us with all your questions and concerns and we'll be with you throughout the whole process. Okay, next slide, please. So again, the review process can take 30 days. You may be approved for a loan modification, but you also might not be. You might be approved for a repayment plan or a short sale or a deed in lieu. So what we would do is, if the borrower has any questions, we would review the decision that was made and get clarification from the servicer as to why that particular decision was made. The application may be denied. And so in that case, our office would make sure that that the denial was for the appropriate reason. So we would look at the documents that were submitted and compare it with the reason that was given for the denial. Okay, next slide, please. So if you are approved for a loan modification, generally there's a trial period, and that could be 3 months or 6 months, where you're required to make trial payments. And that is because they want to know that you can make these payments. So at the end of making these trial payments, then they draw up the permanent loan modification. And when that's drawn up and agreed to and payments start being made, then that's when the borrower is considered to be out of foreclosure. So in a loan modification, the total principal of the existing loan amount doesn't change, but the lender might agree to lower the interest rate, for example, or lengthen the payoff terms. And so that's what affects the payments that are required to be made. You might also be approved for a repayment plan. And in a repayment plan, the past due amount is going to be spread out over a set period of time. And those payments are going to be added to the existing mortgage payments. And that's going to continue until the past due amount is paid up. So in a trial payment period, trial loan modification, and also in a repayment plan, it's important to know that you are not out of foreclosure. So as soon as you miss a payment, you're right back where you started, and they can foreclose. With the permanent loan modification, like I mentioned, then you are out of foreclosure. If you start missing payments at that point, then the lender's required to start the foreclosure process from the beginning. Okay, next slide, please. So with the denial, you can ask for a review of the denial. If you sent in a complete mortgage assistance application at least 90 days before your foreclosure sale, and if your servicer denied you for any trial or permanent loan modification it offers. The appeal needs to be submitted within 14 days after the servicer denies the application, and they have to give you a written response within 30 days of the appeal. If the servicer denies the appeal, then that's it. You can't appeal anymore. If they decide to make you an offer, then you're entitled to 14 days to accept or reject that offer. Next slide. So from the very first conversation that we have with a borrower, we always tell them to beware of scams. In California, foreclosures are public record, so any predatory individual, well, from the date that the notice of default is recorded, any predatory individual or organization or business has access to that information. So the borrower might be bombarded with phone calls or letters. So some ways that scammers contact homeowners are like phony counseling agencies might call offering services for outrageous fees, or predatory lenders convince you to apply for mortgage loans without looking over your financial information or any credit checks, or letters in the mail from fake government agencies trying to convince you to call them to refinance. We have another video on our YouTube page that goes into further detail about these scams. So unfortunately, once a borrower goes into default, they do become vulnerable to these deceptive individuals and organizations. So we tell members of the public and anyone who calls call us. And if you have any questions, concerns, if you're not sure about this mail that you're receiving, and you don't always have to just call us, you can also go on the HUD website and find a HUD approved counselor, and they can also assist you. So that is all for me, and I'm going to hand it back to Sam, and he's going to go over mortgage assistance programs, mortgage relief programs that are now available to the public.
Thank you, Angelina. Well done. So just to go over a couple of programs that are available to one is unique for the County of Los Angeles. The other two are statewide within California. The first one being established by the County Board of Supervisors, the Los Angeles County Mortgage Relief Fund. This fund was established to provide property owners with relief when it came to their ability to pay their mortgage. Now, there are certain criteria for a property owner, or that a property owner must meet. One, the property has to be occupied by the owner. It does have to be located within the County of Los Angeles. Now, it is important to say that even though the city of LA is located within the boundaries of the county, the city of LA is not under the county's jurisdiction and thus would not qualify. Property owners of one unit are eligible as long as the loan balance does not exceed $726,525. And units that are 2 to 4 would qualify if the loan balance is $1 million or less. Now, again, each individual situation is different. Property owners are strongly encouraged to apply online. It is free assistance. It's not something that's required to be paid back, at least so far. The properties that are qualifying at this point would be supervisorial districts 1, 2, and 3. But if you go online to their website, you can figure out where your property is located and if you would qualify from the very beginning. Next slide. Now, the contact information for the organization that is administering this program is the Neighborhood Housing Services of Los Angeles, or NHSLA. Their telephone number is listed there as 888-895-2647, and their website underneath. If you were to just go for NHSLA County or just Mortgage Relief Program, you'd find it very simply. Next slide. Now, the California COVID-19 rent relief for landlords was established actually earlier than the Mortgage Relief Program. Essentially, a landlord who had an eligible renter would be able to be reimbursed for 100% of the rent that was owed to him between April 1st and August 31st of 2021. All of the payments are supposed to be used, or they have to be used, to satisfy the renter's unpaid debt from that time. And the renter is actually going to have to take steps to verify that they meet the eligibility requirements and sign the application stating that they did or they were affected by COVID-19, and that is why they were unable to pay their rent. Next slide. Now, renters, if they do apply, have to have qualified for unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in household income. A prove-up is going to be required that they had a financial hardship directly related to COVID-19, and they are going to have to demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, meaning they could potentially be homeless, in the future if they're not helped. Now, eligible renters whose landlords actually did not participate in the program, this assistance is going to be given directly to the renter, and they're going to be able to sort of try to come back to the landlord and pay up as necessary. Next slide. Now, the information for the California Business Services and Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency is listed here. If you were to go to housing.ca.gov, you would find everything that you need, both for landlords and both for renters. The telephone number is listed there, 833-430-2122. Next slide. Now, the American Rescue Plan was actually created recently on a federal level, and the idea was each state would sort of figure out, beyond just the $1,400 stimulus checks, how to help property owners stay, or how to stabilize the housing industry. It was put up to help Americans stay in their homes by providing emergency aid to cover either back rent, back mortgage payments, or bills. It's there to help struggling homeowners catch up with their mortgage payments and utility costs. It provide additional funding for families and individuals who are recovering from or were at risk of homelessness. Next slide. Now, more recently, the California Mortgage Relief Fund, through the American Rescue Plan for the state of California, was established to help mitigate financial hardships after January 21st of 2020 that were associated with the coronavirus pandemic by providing actual funds to property owners. Next slide. Now, the goal of the California Mortgage Relief Fund is to essentially prevent property owners or homeowners from mortgage delinquencies, receiving defaults, foreclosures, the loss of utilities or home energy services, and especially most of all, the displacement of homeowners who are experiencing financial hardship. Next slide. Now, the California Mortgage Relief Fund is currently taking applications. The amount of money that they have, I'm not quite sure, but they are not set to stop taking applications, I believe, to the year 2025. Just because it's that far away does not mean that a property owner who is in trouble or may be in trouble is discouraged from contacting them. I recently attended a webinar put on by the California Housing Finance Agency, and they recommended that individual go online if they have the ability to apply. If not, a telephone number is listed here as 800-569-4287. They are providing property owners who are in trouble and who qualify with up to $80,000 in mortgage relief to help them come current, to help them keep their property. This loan is, well, this money is not coming in the form of a loan, it's coming in the form of a grant. It's not going to be coming in the form of a silent lien against the property. It's just there to help an individual get back on their feet and get moving again. To me, it seems like a very valuable resource, that's made available to everybody in California. Okay, next slide. Do you have any questions?
Okay, Sam, so one question that we received is if we have the direct number to HUD, or perhaps where we can find that list of HUD-approved sites. I think, Angelina, you mentioned.
The direct number, I wouldn't have it offhand, but if you were to go on the government's Housing and Urban Development website, you would probably find it pretty easily. Even if you were to do a search for HUD-certified agencies in your area, I'm sure a link would pop up. But just make sure you're going to the right website, that it's, HUDHUD.gov, I believe is the website. But yeah, offhand, I wouldn't have the direct number, no.
Okay, so again,
so
for the...
I do have the
Sorry.
direct number. I can give it right here. I'm sorry. So to find a counselor, you can call 800-569-4287.
Great, thank you. And once again, to those of you that are watching the webinar, now's the time that if you have a question for our presenters, please go ahead and ask those in the chat box. The next question that we have, and Sam, I believe this refers to the last couple of programs that you mentioned there, but someone was looking for deadlines on some of those grant programs that you mentioned before.
So from what I understand, both the state program for the rent relief, which would be related to a landlord and that tenant relationship, they're gonna, as for now, they're gonna be running the program till the money runs out. Provided any extra law or something comes in to change it, they're gonna be running till the money comes out. The California Mortgage Assistance Program is scheduled to finish. From what I understand, whether the money runs out or not, at the end of 2025. Now, the mortgage relief program, I don't know that they have a hard and fast sale date, but I do believe that they are sort of going to hold on to it until the money does run out. But again, the deadline is I mean, they're open now. It's encouraged to do something like this sooner rather than later.
Okay, great. So here's a question from one of our viewers here. Is the California Mortgage Relief Fund open to property owners that own a 4-unit property and have lived in one of the units for 23 years in the city of LA? So property owner of a 4-unit property and in the city of LA and live in one of the units.
Got it. Forgive me. So I don't believe that the city of LA is going to be ineligible like the county mortgage relief program. There are other, how would you say, qualifications on the website. I don't remember exactly if a 4-unit property would be eligible. It's still 4 units is still technically considered residential, and especially if one of them is owner occupied, I imagine that was one of the uh, how would you say it? That was one of the common requirements before. But again, I would recommend going to the website calhfa.ca.gov and go through the eligibility requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question that we have here is, can a lien be put on your property without the owner's knowledge?
Oh, okay. So that gets okay. Can you give me a little bit more information on that?
Okay, I think that was the extent of that particular question, but let me see if there's any follow-up there. Yeah, that's just what it states right now. Can a lien be put on your property without the owner's knowledge? So for the attendee that asked that question, I don't know if maybe you can add a little bit more detail to that.
Well, for that, if they don't, I'll just address it sort of generally. The answer is yes. Anytime a property, normally if you borrow, well, not normally, if you borrow money from a lender and you don't pay them back, they're going to notify you that they're going to intend to foreclose, but they don't need your permission to foreclose once you miss that payment. You had given the trustee the permission to foreclose back when you signed the loan document, and you told them, if I don't meet my obligations to the lender, they have the ability to order the trustee to begin the foreclosure process. Now, also, a homeowners association will put a lien against the property once you go behind on at least $1,800 in dues. Now, those are legal. That's legal recourse for a lender to recover their money. Now, illegally, absolutely, somebody can forge a signature. Somebody can find a notary stamp or a notary public who's willing to verify that the property owner agreed to this. And yes, somebody can fraudulently put a lien against your property without your knowledge. The benefit of the LA County homeowner notification program is when you do find that it happened, you're going to get a copy of it in the mail. You're going to figure out something's going on. You're going to get our telephone number, and we're going to be able to counsel you on how to move forward.
Okay, great. And just to follow up to the previous question regarding the California Relief Fund, the same person who asked the question stated that when they entered on the application that they had a 4-unit property, that they weren't allowed to move forward. So perhaps this is something that we would want them to follow up with our department, or do we suggest that they reach out directly to the state of California on that one?
I think on the website it has that information. Sam and Clem attended a meeting yesterday and they shared the information. I was just looking at it. So it says eligible properties are single family attached or detached properties, condominium units, 1 unit owner occupied and manufactured. So I think the 1 unit owner occupied is the answer to the question. I don't think 4 unit owner occupied. I'm assuming that's what that means. But more information, I think, could be found on the website. And I'm trying to find a different phone number for that program, because the phone number that I can see on the slide is the one for HUD. So I think I have a different phone number, so I'm looking that up right now.
Okay, thank you for trying to clarify that one. So Sam, that's the extent of the questions that we have. If any of the viewers have any last second questions they want to get in here, now it's the time. Or is there anything else that we want to address or follow up with, Sam?
I think again, the whole point of these webinars is just to help people understand, or maybe not understand, but give them a good course of, or a good avenue to follow when they are in trouble. Understand that although we may not directly be able to help, we can probably point you in the direction of somebody or an organization that could be able to help. So if you're going to start with anything, when you come face to face with foreclosure, and hopefully none of you ever do, or nobody ever does, but it does happen, give us a call and let's see what, where you're at.
Okay, so I think I found the phone number for the mortgage relief hotline, and that is 888-840-2594. So if you have any questions about the mortgage relief program, that's the number to call to get clarification on issues like that. Is it a 4-unit or 1-unit? What's eligible? Okay.
And for those of you that are viewing, the slides from today's presentation will be available on our website at dcba.lacounty.gov/foreclosure-prevention, and we'll make sure that we make that correction on that phone number before we post it. So someone asked for a little bit of clarification on the lien question, and the same person that asked the question added a little bit more detail here, Sam. So they're asking if a lien can be placed against your title by someone other than the lender. I think that you addressed that, but maybe you can reiterate that a little bit. And specifically, anything where a title is impacted, then they should receive notification. Just confirming that.
Yeah. So just going back, I mean, a lender is going to be able to. Okay, so when you borrow money against a property and it's attached to your property, that's a lien. That deed of trust that you use to purchase the property or to refinance the property, it's a lien. Now, them enforcing the lien through a notice of default is something different. Now, if you didn't borrow money and somebody put a lien against your property in the form of a deed of trust claiming that you did, that would be a crime. And absolutely, yes, crimes can take place. In some sort of instance like that, it's recommended that you contact an attorney and you contact law enforcement. Depending on where you live, certain law enforcement agencies have a real estate fraud division. But if you're not sure of what you receive, give us a call. We have the ability to look it up and see, kind of exactly what it is, and counsel you moving forward.
Okay, Sam, I think that's the extent of our questions. We want to thank everyone for watching our webinar. And Sam, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to end the webinar with here?
No, I know I've been sort of driving this home, but give us a call when something like this comes up. Like I mentioned, everybody's situation is different, it's unique, and there's no two identical pictures here to these financial situations and these home situations. Give us a call. We have counselors available to talk and kind of guide you in the right direction. Maybe we are the best place for you to get help. Maybe we're not. But at least you'll get free, honest, assistance and hopefully answers to your questions, for you to make the right and the correct, most informed decision.
Okay, that concludes our webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. The recording of this will be available on our YouTube page and at our homepage for foreclosure prevention. That's dcba.lacounty.gov/foreclosure-prevention. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.